Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this video, we're going to be talking about the top 10 worst figures for 2024. Now, if you're new to the channel, you have to understand that my top 10 worst figure lists are not just the worst figures, because that would just be the cheapest, crappiest thing, and that would be no fun. We have to include the disappointment factor, figures that should have been good that aren't, or figures that were really expensive but aren't anywhere near good enough. Those kinds of things will make the list. Otherwise, it would just be Marvel Legends and McFarland toys and whatever else you can buy for a lower price. So that's not how we're going to do it. That would be no fun. We do have a separate list for those, at least for Marvel Legends. Those will get their own video. This is going to be the top 10 or so, I think we actually just have 10, worst figures, including biggest disappointments and things like that. Now, of course, this list could change any day of the week that I do this. It has changed plenty of times. It's fairly subjective. There's no way to get around that. So if you have a different list of things in mind, or you think I got something really wrong, you can let me know in the comment section below, and we'll talk about it down there. But for now, we're going to go ahead and do my top 10 list, and we're going to start with number 10. Okay, coming in at number 10, we're going to start with a couple of softballs here. We have the McFarland Toys Nightwing. Now, I know some people actually really like this Nightwing look, and I'm not faulting the look, though I think it is harder to execute in a very cheap way. They decided to go the cheapest route and just really make this thing look like a pile of garbage. They could have very easily just added an overlay piece to do his pattern on his suit. Instead, they painted it on, and it looked like they painted it on while their eyes were closed. So it's just like, if you're not going to do it in a right way, just don't do that character design. So they shouldn't have picked it, but they did, and they did a bad job, so it has to go on the list. Coming in at number 9, now I told you guys we weren't going to do just Marvel Legends and McFarland, and we won't, but we have to get some of them on the list because some of them are just so egregious, and this guy has to make the list, Spider-Shot, because How did this get released? How did they release a figure that has such a glaringly obvious flaw? Those hips are wider than his shoulders, not literally, of course, but you get what I'm saying. It's incredibly bad the way they made this guy, and like it just shouldn't have happened. There's really no excuse for it, and so I had to put him on just for that. Now, obviously, the rest of it is still just a crappy Marvel Legends figure, but how did they do that? How did they manage to release something so egregiously bad when they didn't have to at all? So, like, yeah, it's gonna get on the list. I'm not gonna do all Marvel Legends, I promise, but this one had to make it. Okay, I promise this is the last one for at least a little while. For number 8, we have the Marvel Legends Last Stand Spider-Man. Once again, it's a how the heck did they manage to release a Spider-Man figure like this? It can't pose. It can't pose. I understand he's wearing a jacket, so what? We've had figures of all kinds of character designs, and they can't manage to articulate a guy in a jacket and pants? Like, it's not the craziest design ever, but they made a Spider-Man figure that has to basically stand straight up and down only. Might as well be a 5 POA sort of thing. It's just... Hasbro has been releasing so many crap garbage figures that it is amazing to me they still have a strong following, but this is a perfect example of why people should not be supporting brands. They should only be supporting good product. This is not one of those things. Okay, coming in at number 7, we get to mix it up a little bit. We have the SH Figure Arts Dragon Ball Z Yamcha. Now, I know a lot of people wanted this guy, myself included, when they announced him, but they didn't turn out a good product. His chest is sculpted terribly and painted terribly, and he has a giant head, and it's just like the laziest version of this character that they could have done. I don't mean the character design, I mean the product itself. It's a simple design. It's basically Goku with a different head. I mean, not literally, but basically they should be experts at this point, and instead they gave us like the crappiest thing they could have without it being straight up broken and garbagey. So yeah, very, very disappointed that they made Yamcha, who actually doesn't get enough credit. He's kind of a cool character. They made a horrible figure of him when we really wanted to add a nice, strong release for this guy into our collections. Coming in at number 6, we have the Bring Arts Sephiroth. This is... I know I haven't reviewed a lot of these figures from this line, but this line is horrible. Let me just get that out of the way, but this guy seems like he is by far the worst. Like I said, I haven't reviewed all of them, but just looking at the problems that this guy has, which include... the sculpt is not great, the paints are terrible, the articulation doesn't function, the articulation is engineered incorrectly, and the articulation doesn't work because he's a floppy mess, and he has a limited number of accessories, all coming in at an incredibly high price point. it's just a glaring example of how Square Enix does not know what they're doing and how they really should be licensing out some stuff rather than trying to make more of their garbage crap that they should have stopped a long time ago. Okay, in for number 5, we have the SH Figuarts Guts. There's no way I couldn't put him on the list. It's just such a disappointing release. Not only is it really expensive for an SH Figuarts, I guess for an SH Figuarts it's moderately expensive, but it's a really expensive figure for a character and an IP that people have wanted good figures for a really long time. Bandai really disappointed, I guess we could say, in a nice way, with this release. Its articulation is a mess, the sculpt is a mess, the paints are okay, I guess, in some places, accessories aren't great, like, it's fine, but the aspects to this figure that are good are really just average, and the aspects to this figure that are bad are like some of the worst things you can do. The engineering is so overly complex and not super effective, and once again, the absolute deciding factor for this release that nobody can get around, even though they keep trying to justify, he can't hold his sword, let's say properly, because yes, he can technically hold it, but it is a total failure in terms of an action figure of Guts. A Guts figure that can't hold his sword, that isn't an imposing character, is a failure. And that's what this is, on top of all the technical aspects. There's really no reason to own this unless you have some sort of attachment to the character and don't care about the quality of the product at all. Okay, coming in at number 4, we have to have the Marvel Legends movie Wolverine figure. This is another one of those disappointing figures that's like, how did they manage to do it? Do they not have oversight? Do the people sculpting not know what they're sculpting? Do the people overseeing the sculptors not check it? Do the people overseeing those people not check it? Does anybody at any point make sure things look okay? That's my question, because this is a travesty of an action figure. Why does Wolverine have incredibly big hips? Why is he shaped incredibly wrong? How is a real-life person more heroic than a plastic action figure? It just makes no sense. I will give you, he does have a nice head that comes with him, and that's a good thing, but that's it. That is it. Otherwise, this figure is an absolute disappointment. And I know what you might say if you're a Marvel Legends person, the figure arts one looks bad too. Sure, okay. It does. What does that have to do with this? It's still a horrible figure, and anybody justifying it, you might want to question their credibility, because it's not good. You can just look at it and know right away that it's wrong, but if you need to see the details, you can check my reviews. I would say that for all of these things. These are horrible figures, and people love to try to justify things these days, especially since Wolverine and Deadpool are super popular. Hey, it's the best thing ever. The figure's not. The figure's one of the worst things ever, and if this was my personal list and not trying to be somewhat objective, I'd put it at number 1 just out of spite, because it is that terribly wrong. Okay, coming in at number 3, I had to include him on this list. It's the Figure Arts Kenshin. Why did they screw up Kenshin? Bandai got all of these anime licenses recently, and they're like making things for everything. It should have been the absolute golden era for Bandai releasing figure arts for anime. They have everything, yet most of them have been bad. How did they do that? I don't know. We have Berserk, we have One Piece totally floundering, and now we have Kenshin, who is one of their worst releases in a really long time, on the heels of making a figure with baggy pants incredibly well for Demon Slayer. And then they made Kenshin, one of the most popular anime of all time, or at least most iconic, well-renowned, however you want to put it. Then they make this robotic-looking mess of a figure. It couldn't be more disappointing. People have been wanting a figure of this from Bandai, this style figure, for ages, and then they finally get the license, everyone's hyped, and they release this. How could you screw it up that badly? I'm asking that question a lot, because it seems like none of these companies are trying hard enough. In this list anyway. In the top 10 list, it's going to be like, hey, these are the best companies ever. But that goes to show you how much of a disparity there is between the good and the bad. It doesn't make sense. Something's amiss in the toy industry, and maybe a list like this will help get things changed, though I highly doubt it. It should just be for purely entertainment purposes. But who knows? Maybe we'll get a little bit of extra bonus mojo from something like this. Okay, bring on the haters. I'm coming up with number 2, and it's Gear 5 Luffy. I know there's a strong contingent of people out there who love this figure, and if you love it, great, more power to you. But that doesn't mean it is good, and that doesn't mean it's not disappointing. The real problem here is that the one good thing is that it looks really good, is the only good thing about it. It doesn't pose anywhere near as well as it should. It doesn't pose as well as a normal character, let alone somebody who's made out of rubber and the most flexible curly character there ever was. The bendable arms, okay on paper, in practice they didn't do a good job. They're not super bendable, and they didn't come with regular arms. So all you have is these goofy bendy arms that don't really work. And it's at a higher price point. And on top of that, the main joints that aren't the bendy things don't work well either. And on top of that, the cloud thing that goes around his neck just falls off and is a busted mess. This figure was very poorly conceived, very poorly executed. It does look really good. It makes for a great photo. If you only want to do one photo with it, that's fine. But everything else on this figure is a huge miss. And I know people will be happy if they remade it with different aspects. Even though they're trying to justify it now because it's the only one that exists and people bought it and wanted the character, okay, fine. You know you wish things were different about it. Even if you love it, you wish things were different in a serious way. And they should have been. They should have been. This whole One Piece line is kind of a disaster. This one's a pretty good example. Okay, here we go. Coming in at number 1, we have the 1000 Toys Noble 6 from Halo Reach. I know there's a lot of hard coping going on with this release. It's actually such an excellent release. I just don't understand, guys. I don't understand. No, what I don't understand is how it's a $200 figure with the worst engineering possible and the absolute worst paint job, and incredibly limited accessories, and also false advertising for the chrome visor. They couldn't even do a chrome visor. We had Joyride Toys doing this 20 years ago. Was it 20 years ago already? Dang, probably was. Anyway, they had a chrome visor on a figure all the way back then. Hasbro does them now on Cobra. They couldn't do a chrome visor on a $200 figure. They had to do some weird, crappy, clear gloss plastic with a pearl coat on top of some silver paint or gold paint. And then it's a painted figure, as they like to advertise, as if nobody expected paint on their action figure. It's not a model kit, but it actually does look like a model kit, and they call it painted. It's a flat paint job. There's almost literally no detail in this paint job, and the parts that are painted, it's just flat gray. And also the grays aren't accurate. And also it's missing a knife sheath. There's nothing good about this other than the sculpt is fairly sharp. That's it. It's not even put together well, and some of the ball sockets, or at least some of them, maybe all of them, are ABS. You don't make ball sockets out of ABS plastic because it cracks, and you end up with loose joints. Not that it didn't come with loose joints to begin with, but really, guys, for $200, this thing should have been an entirely different figure. This figure is maybe worth maybe $50 to the collector. I know it cost them more to make that, but they made all the wrong choices, which probably made it cost even more for their production team, but it's not good. There's nothing that's actually good about this. There are things that are acceptable, but then when you consider the price point, it's not even close. It's not even close. This is right up there with the Play Arts or Bring Arts figures as far as the overpriced nature of it goes, but this thing is executed even worse. Even worse, it's less accurate. Like I said, the paints are just basically non-existent. 100% disappointing for Halo fans. And it's part of a team of 6 characters, and they're all coming in at about $200. That's a $1,200 price point for this team of characters. It's a ridiculous thing all the way around. Alright guys, that was my top 10 worst figures for 2024. I know a lot of those were actually just the most disappointing ones, but they are bad enough that I think it's fair they're on the list. I think it's time we held these companies a little bit more accountable for the products they release and expect us to spend money on. So yeah, I'm okay with this list, but I'm sure some of you are not. And for those of you who aren't just freaking out saying I'm unsubscribing, let me know in the comment section below what you actually think. Do you think you would put different things on the list, or just remove my list altogether, or rearrange it, or what? Let me know. We'll talk down there, but that'll do it. Make sure you stick around, guys. I have basically non-stop top 10 lists coming, at least until Christmas, so come back for all of that good stuff, and in the meantime, keep collecting.